Hi everyone, welcome to my channel if you're new here, welcome back to my channel if you're a returning viewer or subscriber. Today is going to be my enormous March wrap up. So in March I read, I think it was 8 books, maybe a DNF one of them, but either way it was like a lot of books. I've got many things to say about them, so I feel like this is going to be a long video, so I will try and go into as much depth as possible with each of these reads, but for the most part I think I'm going to be trying to snap through things a little bit because I fear for the battery of this camera. Without further ado, let's just get going. So the first book that I read in March I'm not excited to speak about because I really did not like it, and it's a super duper popular book. I hinted at my unenjoyment of this book in my, was it my previous video? No, my video like 2 videos ago where it was an unhaul, because yes, I decided to unhaul this book. Devastating, I know, but just bear with me, okay? Powerless by Lauren Roberts. So this book absolutely kind of took the world by storm. A few months ago it was everything, and the sequel's actually coming out. I think there's one book coming out in summer and then there's one maybe in winter as well, I'm not sure, but like this is just massive. And the reason why this kind of took off was because the author took people through her writing journey on TikTok, and her videos kind of blew up and she got signed to a publisher and everything like that. I really respect that side of it. I think the author seems like a really lovely person, and I'm told that she actually reads reviews, which terrifies me because I really didn't enjoy this book and I want to kind of go in on my feelings, but I also don't want to offend anybody. So if you love this book, or if you are the author and you're somehow watching this video, I could never write a fantasy book even to this standard, so all props to you. But I do want to talk about how I feel about it because I feel like I am quite alone in disliking this. As I spoke about this book in my unhaul video, I did notice a couple of people also felt similarly to me. Powerless follows Payden, and she is an ordinary in this world of ordinaries and elites. The ordinaries have been ruled out because they're people who don't possess a gift, like a magic gift. So some of these people have like immense strength, some of them can teleport, things like that. Ordinaries in this world have been kind of ruled out because the king of the land told the people that ordinaries are kind of like a disease. They weaken the other people within their society and things like that. Payden is an ordinary, but she is posing as an elite. She's posing as a psychic in order to survive in this kingdom because she'll be sentenced to death or banished if she's honest about who she is and the fact that she has no abilities. Kai is one of the sons of the king. Payden gets brought into the castle so that she can compete in this competition. It's like a Hunger Games-esque thing. It's to like settle the disputes within the land. Yeah, that's the basic premise of Powerless. The main problem I had with this book was that it was very obviously a debut. Nothing wrong with the debut. Every single author has to start somewhere, but this book felt like very poorly written, and that the publisher, like, it surprised me that this was traditionally published because I feel like Simon Schuster, like, what was the editor doing on this? I see basically no evidence of any editing having been done. I'm gonna really quickly run through all the things I didn't like about this book, just in case people are curious, but if this is just getting you down a little bit and you love this, then please feel free to skip forward and, you know, get on to the next book if you want to hear my thoughts on that, because I did give this 2 stars overall. The one thing I will say that I did enjoy about it was that there were some really cute lines. It wasn't enough, and it just kind of, you know, it didn't sustain my enjoyment of the book. So I've got my list on my laptop here, and I'm gonna quickly run through everything that I didn't like about this, just like reel it off. Some of the lines had me physically cringing because of how poorly written they were. There was a huge amount of alliteration that was just like, it felt like high school writing, you know, like the story literally ends with like, and then I woke up and it was all a dream. Like, it felt like that kind of thing in terms of the literary devices that we used within the book, that were just so kind of basic and evident. There was so much repetition of various phrases and various like aspects of the book we just kept getting told about, and this book is very long. It's like over 500 pages, and I just feel like it didn't need to be anything near that. You could have cut off like at least 150 pages from this book. You know, every single fight someone has a nosebleed. The word powerless comes up 500,000 times. I mean, I could probably look it on my Kindle, because I did switch over to my Kindle for some of this read because I just wanted to like bash through it a little bit. Ocean eyes and dimples, those things were always pointed out. The phrases vicious little thing and darling, I don't think I could hear that one more time. I think I actually have a fit. Kai was always introduced to us as the future enforcer. His brother was always introduced to us as the future king. Just call them by their names, you know. I'd rather just hear the word Kai. We don't need to be doing that every single time. Nose flicks. He was always flicking her nose or something like that. I don't even know. The king's love being exclusively given to his queen. Every single time the king was mentioned, it'd be like, the king looked adoringly at his queen, the only person he loved. And I was like, okay. Nothing about the trials was the same as before. We had that line so many times, but we were not told what the trials were like before. We were just told that nothing was the same as before. Like, there were actual grammar mistakes I picked up on. I didn't write them down, but I literally, like, there were some parts of this I couldn't believe it, and I couldn't believe that I'd actually read the same content that other people had read, or the same material. It was complete insta-love. This is meant to be enemies to lovers, but they have an instant attraction. I'd say it was actually more kind of forbidden love, because they're obviously not allowed to be together, because A, Kai thought that Payton was an elite, and B, she like lived in the slums or whatever of the city, so the king would not have approved. The characters were uninteresting. They were just like cliches basically. The book was way too long, I already said that. It was very, very predictable. There was like no world building. We weren't told of like really what had happened in the past. Maybe we'll find that in future books, but I just feel like things needed to be established in this book. And considering this book is so long, like how were they not established? This is a major point. It's a complete rip-off of a lot of other classic YA series. The Hunger Games, it's obviously a massive influence from the Hunger Games. The very Korean series, even Throne of Glass, the trials are very similar to Throne of Glass. And it honestly got to the point where I was like, surely these other authors could sue Lauren Roberts. Is so blatantly stolen, you know? I mean, they've probably got better things to do. I mean, Suzanne Collins is probably rolling in her millions. She doesn't need to know that, but because of this like rip-off thing, it kind of meant that it read a little bit like fan fiction of those series, because those series were just so much better and original in their ideas, or more original. Just tropes. This book just felt like a checklist of all the tropes. There was a love triangle between the two brothers and Payton, and we never got the POV of one of the brothers, so it was just very obvious from the beginning that the romance was going to be between Payton and Kai. I don't think that element was like necessary. It didn't really add anything to the story. One of the major characters dies, and there's a joke about how one of the other characters is like dealing with their death, and I'm like, and I thought it was just like very insensitive. Also, my little brother's just got in the shower, so that's what that noise is. He always leaves things last minute, and it means that there's noise in the background of my video. That's fine, it's fine, everything's fine. Yeah, that's all I have to say basically. I'm gonna stop myself, but there was just so many points. I could go into more things. As you can see, my list was kind of like never ending as it is. Okay, he was actually in the shower so long that I had to stop filming because he started singing, and yeah, but I feel like that was probably good because it meant that I stopped ranting about powerless. I feel like just overall it just didn't work for me, and that's fine. We can just move on. It was kind of surprising to have a different opinion from a lot of people, because I was really excited to love this, and I was upset that I didn't enjoy it. Then I needed a total switch in vibe. I couldn't pick up anything kind of similar. I spent such a long time going through that book, so by the end I was kind of just desperate to get it done. So I chose August Blue by Deborah Levy. This is one that was actually on my TBR for the month, and it was also, I think, the only kind of literary fiction style book that I picked for myself. I read one of Deborah Levy's books. It was Things I Don't Want to Know. It's the first part in her living autobiography series, so non-fiction, and I was really eager to pick up her fiction, because in her non-fiction book she writes a lot about why she loves to write fiction. The plot of this one is quite abstract, and because of that I would actually recommend that you go into it like mostly quite blind, so I feel like I won't go through a lot of what this book is about. But the thing you're initially told is that you're following Elsa, and Elsa is a concert pianist. She is extremely talented, and she's been playing the piano since she was little, and she was adopted as a child by this much older man who kind of took her on as his like prodigy and didn't kind of parent her in like a normal way, because he was kind of like harboring her talent so much. Elsa grows up, she's very famous, and as a woman there's one performance in her career where she just gets up mid-performance and walks off the stage, and she leaves everything behind and goes to Europe. So this book is set across several different countries, and that's part of what I really enjoyed about it. One of the things I loved in the Levy that I've read is her descriptions of the world around her, and particularly the world around her in a place that she's not familiar with, so as she's traveling. The writing was really beautiful. It was kind of stark and simplistic, but it also just like captured this essence. In all of my books that are kind of 5-star reads, the author being able to capture an atmosphere and then relay that to me is like a kind of must. So I did really enjoy that. I thought the book was kind of speculative. It talks a lot about illness and grief, and it's also a lot to do with Elsa's relationship with her father, her relationship with her birth mother, and that whole story, because she's very unaware of, you know, her biological family. But yeah, just a really beautiful story. Very much one of those ones left you thinking afterwards, which I really enjoyed, but also allowed for kind of different interpretations, and I feel like that is where some people might not enjoy this read. You prefer things to be kind of more rounded out. There were some parts that I felt like I didn't connect to as much, mostly the whole side where Elsa keeps running into this woman who she's never met, this like kind of doppelganger. Overall I thought it was a really good book, and I really enjoyed my time reading it. I'm so happy to have read another Levy, and I definitely want to read more of her work, and I gave this one 4 stars. Next up, I finally finished Northanger Abbey by Jane Austen. This is my 3rd Austen. I read Pride and Prejudice in school, I read Sense and Sensibility last year, and then I read Northanger Abbey. This is my least favourite of her work so far. I gave this one 3 stars. Following this girl, she's called Catherine Morland, and she's absolutely obsessed with like gothic novels, and she just wishes that her life was that, she was like living one of those. She lives in the countryside, and she's sent off to Bath as her first kind of like season, because this is obviously set in like the beginning of the 1800s. Women were sent off to make their like seasons debut. Catherine is very young, she is very naive, and I'd say this book probably reads a little bit like a coming of age novel. It's a lot about her naivety and how she gets taken advantage of by the people in her life, by people who like claim to be her friends. The thing that I didn't really love about it is that I went into it thinking it really captured the gothic atmosphere, but we didn't actually get to Northanger Abbey, the place where that all happens, until the last kind of third of the novel, and I think that's where it kind of picked up for me. The first half I found a little bit boring, and it also was kind of evident that this was Austen's first novel, so I just think that it just felt a little bit flat for me in that regard. I also didn't have basically any interest in the relationship. Jane Austen's novels always end with our main character getting married. I didn't have any investment in that relationship, and I didn't really care enough. It was good, but it wasn't great, and it was fine. You know, I just didn't feel like connected to it, but I'm very glad to have read it and to have kind of ticked it off my list, because I'm trying to get through all of her 6 major novels. So it's 3 stars for Northanger Abbey. But then we've read one of my favourite books I've read this year. I absolutely adored this, and that was The World Is Going to Love This, Up from the Basement with the Strokes by Raphael. So this is a memoir, and as the title kind of suggests, he was very, very closely linked with the Strokes because he was the producer of their first 2 albums, Is This It and Room on Fire. I love the Strokes, and one of my favourite ever bands, within my top 5, so I feel like going into this I already knew this was going to be something that was going to interest me a little bit. But actually a good part of the book, a good majority of like the first part, has nothing at all to do with the Strokes, because we're following Gordon from when he is kind of a teenager, when he's first kind of making his moves within the music scene. He talks a lot about the tech he uses, like the different mics and things like that, kind of an area that I don't really have any knowledge in, and also not a massive amount of interest in like the actual kind of technical side of music. I just like listening to it basically, but I also like the creation of it. I like seeing how each of these people kind of worked alongside him to create what they did. But what was amazing is that even on this like big chunk, 100 pages or whatever, of nothing to do with the Strokes, I was still incredibly invested. I was almost like as keen in those bits as I was with the bits about the Strokes. This is the most well-written book and the most underrated book. It has very, very few reviews on Goodreads, and I feel like it's just like a hidden gem, and I feel so lucky to have discovered this. I found it through Instagram actually. My friend read it and she really loved it. She's a fan of the Strokes as well. I feel like if you're a fan of the Strokes, it's absolutely kind of like a no-brainer to read this one. But I also wish that every single other music producer of my favourite albums and of my favourite music artists did something like this, because Gordon is so generous with his time. He seems like a really lovely, good kind of guy, and he tells you all the tech he uses. Like, he literally breaks everything down for you, and he tells you exactly how he got to where he was. He's also very honest with things. He had like a drug addiction. If you're interested at all in the music scene, if you just love memoirs, or if you're a fan of the Strokes or any of the other people who Gordon Raphael's worked with, Regina Spektor, The Libertines, there's so many people mentioned in here. So this was like the most solid kind of 5-star read, and I need more of this. Music producers, I want to see what you have to say about your lives, because that was everything. Okay, next up I read and then DNF'd a book called Curious Beginning by Deanna Raybourn. This is a really popular kind of historical mystery kind of romance. This is the first one, and there's like 10 of them or something like that. I was inspired to pick them up by Katie from Katie's Reading, and she loves the series. It's one of her favourites. I got 25% in, didn't really feel that invested in the story. I didn't really like the writing style. I found it kind of similar to Emily Wilde. These historical fiction authors who write in like a Regency time period kind of write in the style of Jane Austen, which is fine when it's Jane Austen, but when it's like a modern book that's kind of doing that whole thing, also often written by an American who's writing about English culture, I just find it really kind of like jarring. On top of that, I didn't really like the characters. I didn't connect with them. I also just didn't really enjoy them. I didn't like the kind of language they used and like the way they interacted. I just didn't care, and I was like, there's no point me slogging through this book. I still haven't my Kindle, I haven't deleted it, so it's like a soft DNF. So if I ever feel like picking it up again, I will do so, but for now I'm fine with kind of just not doing that. Next up, I also finished a book I've been in the middle of for a little while, and that is Getting Lost by ernaux. This is my second ernaux, and I started this in the beginning of January or February, I can't remember. I've been reading this kind of on and off for a couple of months, and I feel like the game changer in terms of me making some progress with this was downloading it on my Kindle, because it meant that I didn't have to worry about this beautiful white cover getting ruined by throwing it in my bag and stuff like that. Also, I could read it at night because I love reading in bed on my Kindle. This is the diary that ernaux kept during a relationship she had with a married man. So subject matter is immediately, you know, like a little bit kind of taboo and difficult to read about. I also been personally kind of affected by affairs, so some of this was quite difficult to read. But the reason why I really wanted to kind of like attempt to give it a go was because one of my favorite ever books is Simple Passion by Ernaux, and that is the fictional account of this affair. I definitely didn't enjoy this as much as Simple Passion, but I kind of didn't think I would. It was very, very repetitive. Ernaux is in this relationship with this man who really doesn't care about her at all, except for like kind of one thing. That means that a lot of the time that she's writing, she is talking about the waiting periods in between his visits. The other thing is it kind of gave me a little bit of an icky feeling because of the subject matter. I feel like I wasn't as affected by that in Simple Passion, but it definitely was kind of more real when you're just given the kind of raw facts of it. There are some sections that I really, really loved. There were some lines that I just thought were incredible, and I really kind of found so much more within them than what Ernaux was saying. That was kind of mixed up with a lot of kind of just mundane nothingness. It was kind of a tricky one to decide how I feel when I came out the other end of it. It also just doesn't have any conclusive ending at all, because it just finishes at the random point in Ernaux's life, and the last entry is not very satisfying in kind of wrapping things up, because that's not the way that life works. I gave it 3 stars overall, maybe a 3.5, but I think I'm happy with a 3. I'm very, very glad to have read it, and I'm glad that I managed to get through it. And I'm very, very excited to pick up more Ernaux because I love her writing. It's just brilliant. Even when she's writing about stuff that's kind of just boring and repetitive and she's becoming a little bit annoying, I still enjoy her writing style immensely. The next book that I got to in March was a reread actually, and it was A Throne of Glass by Sarah J Maas. It's kind of funny doing a reread of this book because I actually haven't read any of the books in this series other than The Assassin's Blade. I feel like if I was going to do a reread of most big fantasy series, I would only do that once I got through the entire thing, if that makes any sense. But the reason why I wanted to do a reread of this one was because I'm really itching to pick up Crown of Midnight, the second book. But I read Throne of Glass too many years ago. I read it at the end of 2022, and I feel like I just needed a refresher. This was really great and also really inspired me to pick up Crown of Midnight. Throne of Glass follows Selena. She is an assassin. The book starts with her working in the salt mines, and it's her kind of punishment. She is kind of imprisoned in these mines, slaving away for the rest of her life. She's rescued by the prince of the kingdom, Prince Dorian, and he takes her because he wants her to be his kind of sponsor in this competition. Competitors are all competing to become the king's champion, which is basically the king's dirty hands, you know, like the king's personal assassin. I enjoyed this book so much more this time around. The first time around I rated it 3.5 stars, and this time I rated it 4.5, so it went up an entire star. I thought it was incredibly well written, and I think that's one of the reasons why I particularly enjoyed this, was because A, I'd read Powerless early in the month and they're quite similar reads, but this one was just so much better, and B, I'm also reading House of Sky and Breath, which is the second Crescent City book, which is another series by Sarah J Maas. And I actually buddy read this book with Lucy, whose channel I have linked down below. I really enjoyed that experience, but we both agreed that Sarah J Maas's writing is so much better in this first Throne of Glass book than it is in her Crescent City series, which doesn't make any sense because Crescent City she wrote as like an adult, you know, she's like in her 30s, and she wrote the bare bones of Throne of Glass when she was 16. Make that make sense. I loved Selena. I really enjoyed her character the first time round, but I enjoyed her a lot more this time round. I really liked seeing like her kind of quick-wittedness, but also she has so much like warmth and still this kind of like innocence to her character despite being this like world famous assassin. I also appreciated Kale so much more. This book is a little bit of a love triangle, kind of much more of a love triangle than I think I first thought on the first read, between Kale and Dorian. Kale is the commander general of the army, of the king's army, and he's also Dorian's best friend. I found him a little bit boring in the first read, but I think I really enjoyed his character this time around, like a lot more. I'm so excited to read Crown of Midnight. I'm so excited to see how the rest of this book series goes. If you're wondering why this wasn't a 5, I just didn't get a 5-star feel. I'm sure that one of the next books in the series will be a 5, because if I love the first one this much and people say it gets better and better, then I feel like it's a no-brainer. I'm so excited to continue my reread with Lucy. Like I said, we had such a fun time with it, and we're hoping to actually reread the entire series together. I just loved it. And it really felt like a comfort read to me. That's another thing I want to say actually. Which is so bizarre because this series is not a comfort read for me. Like, I love the Avatar series, but like I haven't read enough of Throne of Glass to really get that feeling. Even still, it just felt so wonderful to read. Maybe it's because I was familiar with the events of the plot. I don't know, I just had so many good things to say about this book. Okay, and then the final book that I read in the month of March was Book Lovers by Emily Henry. This is my 3rd Emily Henry book. I'm reading all of her books in publication order, so I started with Beach Read, and then I read You and Me on Vacation, and now we got to Book Lovers. I'm really excited to pick up Happy Place, her 4th book. But here's the thing, I just don't think I'm an Emily Henry girly. I didn't dislike this at all. I'm not about to go in on it because I really didn't dislike it. Didn't really, you know, like I'll explain myself. So I gave Beach Read 2 stars. realistically it's probably more of like a 1.5. I thought it was well written, but I had so many major issues with that book. Then I read You and Me on Vacation and I loved that. I gave it 4.5 stars. And then I read Book Lovers and I ended up giving this one a 3. So Book Lovers follows Nora. She is a literary agent living in New York City, and her sister and her decide to go on this vacation to this little town where one of Nora's clients, their book is set. If that makes any sense. Like, one of the people she's an agent for has written a book about this kind of like little small town, and while she's down there she bumps into her work nemesis Charlie. Charlie is an editor also working in the book industry, and they've had quite a few like crossovers like professionally, and they've decided they don't like each other. But while they're down there they can't help bumping into each other because it's a small town, and they kind of live out the whole like classic rom-com vibe, which is really funny when they're both, or particularly Nora, she's always making fun of that basically, and her own love life has kind of sucked. I think I had much more of an emotional connection with You and Me on Vacation, and I just didn't get that at all with this one. I didn't really care about what was happening. I thought that it was extremely well written. Like, this is so well written. Like, Emily Henry, I think she's a brilliant writer. I think her books just get better and better as they go on, which I feel like makes sense. But Book Lovers was definitely her best written by far. And I also thought that Charlie had the most personality out of any of her previous protagonists or any of her previous love interests. I didn't really love Nora, but I just feel like I didn't like her character. I know a lot of people relate to her. I feel like if I'd been the same, I would have enjoyed her a lot more. Some of the things that she thought were important in life I kind of disagreed with, so it just was never, I feel like I was like running alongside this book, and we never kind of clashed, but we also just could never agree on something. I thought it was good. Obviously some people really love it. If you're curious about it, I would definitely recommend giving it a go, because I think it is a really, really well written, well kind of plotted and structured book, but I just don't think that it's for me. So 3 stars for this, and thankfully I can unhaul it because I hate this book cover. It's one of the worst. I hate the color combination, I hate the graphics, everything. So it's unhauled. I mean, it's being unhauled. I've been talking for too long. Okay, so here we go. These are the many books that I read in the month of March. We had a really successful reading month in terms of quantity. Quality also, I mean, it was quite mixed, but I got a 5-star read. I can't complain. There was only one book that I really didn't enjoy, and I had a DNF, which is fine. So I feel like all in all, a reasonably successful reading month, and I'm excited to see how April goes. I'm already enjoying one of the books I'm currently reading. You can check out my April TBR if you're interested. I picked all the books based on TBR jar prompts, which is always a lot of fun. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for being here. If you stuck to the end of this video, I am eternally grateful to you, because I know for a fact this was a long one. If you enjoyed it, please give it a thumbs up. Let me know that you did. Comment down below how you feel about any of these books. I'd love to know your opinions, even if you majorly disagree with me, even if Powerless is your favorite book of all time, or you're an Emily Henry stan. Subscribe if you want to stick around and see more of my reading, see more of what I get to in the month of April. I'll see you very, very soon in a couple of days for another video. Bye bye.